Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ignorant Intellectual on Media. Today, I thought we would do a private sale haul because pretty much all the stuff that's on my desk over the last week or so, I've picked up on private sales either through Kijiji or Facebook Marketplace. And I also went to an estate sale that didn't really have very much, but it did have some films. But all the films I already had, or they were like mainstream stuff. But he did have a pretty good CD collection at the house, so I did pick up some CDs off of the owner, and I'll show them to you here. Uh, but this will be mostly movies, television, and a few CDs and actually like four LPs. So actually maybe yeah. So I think four LPs. No, six LPs. I forgot about these ones. Okay, so all right. So let's do the CDs first. All right. So let's do. Okay, first up we got Katie Lied by Steely Dan. Steely Dan, one of the best groups to mix rock and jazz together into a fusion that is extremely pleasing to the ear. And the lyrics are really good as well. But I think it's lost on young people. I think, I don't know, it may be a bias or whatever, but I, from personal experience, I never really liked Steely Dan until I hit my mid to late 30s. And then, everything that they talked about and the music itself and everything kind of hit me, and I went, "Wow, this band is extremely good." Um, because when you're in your 20s, everything is in extreme, right? So I really like really slow music, contemplative, depressive type of music, and I really like fast, upbeat, speed type of music, right? But anything in between, um, some of it I like, some of it I didn't, but mostly was like, okay, but that's kind of boring to listen to, right? So, but once you hit 35, 40, and then you start listening to Steely Dan, you realize how great of a group they were, right? So, um, and Katie Lied is a very good, probably, I don't think this is their best album, but, they made like four albums, if I remember correctly, that were extremely good, and this is one of them, all right? Next up after that is Nirvana Unplugged. Nirvana's best album, obviously, is Nevermind. This is basically them. There was like a slew of CDs that came out around this time. When was this, like 1990s? Yeah, 1994. Around that time, the MTV would bring like extremely good bands into their studio and turn them from a electric uh, laden band with electric guitars or whatever, into an acoustic band where it would be more intimate, right? And unplugged, basically, no amplifiers, right? So there's a lot of different bands that went in and did an unplugged album. This one is one of the better unplugged albums. It has mostly Kurt Cobain and his guitar basically singing a lot of the songs off of the first two albums, right? Um, so not too bad. The guy also was a Pink Floyd fan, so he had these two albums from Pink Floyd, "Wish You Were Here" and uh, "Dark Side of the Moon." Now, Dark Side of the Moon is one of the greatest albums of all time, a top 10 album of all time. Um, extremely, extremely good. But my favorite is The Wall. I really enjoyed The Wall. I liked when I was young to listen to it um, in the dark with my eyes closed, with the stereo, like a speaker on one side and the speaker on the other side, and just listen to it atmospherically at the time, right? And really blew me away. So I like it better than Dark Side of the Moon, but that's just me personally. Both of those albums are like two of the greatest albums I've ever made, and this one isn't far behind it, which is "Wish You Were Here." This is basically, has "Shine On You Crazy Diamond," which is basically the whole album is basically a dedication to Sid Barrett, one of the first band members, uh, and he was around for their first album, but then he had mental issues, and he ended up leaving the band, and they went on without him, and kind of Rod, sorry, David Gilmour ended up joining the band on guitar after that, right? Um, so, but an extremely good album as well. All Pink Floyd stuff is good if you like really like psychedelic, mellow type of rock, right? So he also had this one, Supertramp's Crime of the Century. He didn't have Breakfast in America or others, but he did have this one. And Supertramp is an extremely good band as well. At least one of their albums is in a top 100 position. This one has Bloody Well Right and Crime of the Century and Dreamer. Anyways, extremely good. But I think Breakfast in America is probably their best. So then he also liked Simon and Garfunkel. So they have Bridge Over Troubled Waters, right? The Sound of Silence, and Bookends. Now, out of all three of these, this is probably their best or greatest album. They had like four, I think, four or five extremely good albums um, for the songs that you liked, right? How to describe it? Simon and Garfunkel is probably the greatest duo of all time, greatest folk duo or soft rock type of duo um, of all time. I don't think there's probably any buddy that's better and more successful than they were, right? So, but their albums, they have some extremely good songs on their albums, but every once in a while there'll be a song that you kind of scratch your head to saying that's not of the caliber of the other songs, right? So they like, let's say, Queen or the Police, all great bands, all had great music, but when you listen to their albums, you can see the difference between the hits or the really good songs and the other songs that are on albums that make you perhaps uh, pick up a greatest hits album rather than the albums themselves and be satisfied with that. And you know, Simon Garfunkel's greatest hits is one of the greatest hits albums of all time, up there with Legend. Bob Marley's Legend, and the Police would be Every Breath You Take. Would probably be their best compilation album. If you want to avoid some of the not all that great songs that you will get on some of their albums, right? So Simon and Garfunkel is kind of that way, but there's enough songs on each one of their albums that it's worth picking up their albums themselves to listen to, right? So, um, and the ones that are good are extremely good. All right. So next up, he also liked the Who because he had Tommy. Now the Who's greatest album is probably Who's Next. Tommy, not too bad, not too bad. I never really got into this album as much, but I haven't listened to this album in 30 years maybe. So when I saw it, I said, I'm going to pick that up. I'm going to listen to it in the car, right? And so that's what I'm going to do with that. And lastly, the next CD is one of the greatest live albums of all time, and that's Frampton Comes Alive. It has, Do You Feel Like We Do, one of the greatest live songs ever made, right? If you ever listen to Frampton's discography and you listen to like the studio version of that song and you listen to it on this album, the difference between the two is like night and day. And um, this is an extremely good live album. All of other Frampton stuff, for some reason, doesn't reach up to this double album, but it's one of the greatest albums of all time. Live albums of all time, anyways. All right, so those are the CDs that I picked up at that estate sale. What should we do next? All right, let's do some movies next. Okay, so I picked up um, three selections from a gentleman um, who I picked up stuff in the past. So he seems to have, like many people, for some reason they hitch on to maybe a trend, maybe they see something, and then they start buying. They have a hobby and they decide that film is going to be their hobby, and then they start picking up stuff. Right? I mean, I do this myself too, and they'll pick up stuff and then um, they'll put it on the shelf and they'll collect whatever it is they're collecting, and then bang, um, I don't know, maybe they hit a rough patch in their life and then they have to start selling stuff off, or maybe they just got bored with it and said, I want to move on to something else, or maybe, this was done during COVID and now COVID's over, I can get back to my life, or maybe it's, they're single and so they need a hobby, and then they meet their significant other, and that hobby kind of goes to the wayside. Whatever the reason is, there's so many people that end up buying movies and other things off of that have these things, and they bought them new, right? And they're still in their packaging, never watched, and then you wonder why they picked it up, right? If they're not going to watch it, right? What it usually means, it doesn't mean they don't like the movie. It means one of two things usually, okay? And if you ever question a collector, um, they'll sometimes they'll get upset with you saying, well, you why do you buy stuff that you haven't even watched, and maybe you never will watch, right? And the reason why you collect goes right over their head, right? But some of the main reasons why, let's say somebody has a new item in their library that they never opened and then they end up selling, is because number one, they've already seen the movie and this is a memento of it, right? So they'll when they get the urge to watch that movie again, maybe they'll open it and watch it, or maybe they have more of like a watching copy, like a Blu-ray or something, a regular Blu-ray, and this one is like a collector's item, let's say. Maybe it's a high-end, Steelbook, or maybe it's a really in a nice Arrow package or whatever, right? So they keep it new, and then they'll watch, let's say, the regular Blu-ray if they want to see the movie. All right, that's number one. Number two, so they've already seen the movie, and they probably won't see it for another few years. So, and then maybe before the time they ended up wanting to see the movie, they've gotten bored of the hobby, or they moved on to something else or whatever, and then they start selling things off that they haven't even seen yet, right? Um, so that's one. Uh, Sorry, that's the second one. So the first is, it's a memento of a movie that they've already seen. They want a nice copy of the film, but they're not going to open it, right? They'll just watch a regular, or they've bought it with the intention of watching it, but they're not going to open it until they actually do watch it. And then what happens is they come into some financial hard times, or maybe, like I said, they COVID's over or whatever the reason, and then they don't, go to it, and they start selling things off, and it ends up still being new, right? So those are the great buys. Those are the ones that you want to get in on, because they usually, if they are selling the stuff, they'll usually be reasonable about what, they're not going to get what they paid for it, right? Even though it's new, it's not really new if you think about it. Um, it's new when it was first purchased from the, the person that was selling it originally, right? So if it's Arrow, if it's an Arrow video, then it would be new if you bought it from Arrow or one of their subsidiaries that sell it, right? But if you bought it and now you're going to resell it, and you're not a vendor or whatever, then it's used, but it's new. It's new, but it's used, right? So you're not going to get a new price for it, right? So you usually get a pretty good price. That's a good discount off of what the new price that the person actually, when they bought it, paid for it, right? So those are always advantageous, right? So anyway, so this guy had three, um, and two of them he didn't even open yet. All right, so probably the best or most known, or the best, one of the best horror films, Canadian horror films, werewolf films, is the Ginger Snaps franchise, especially the first one. And he had the trilogy, all right, and he picked it up, and he never watched it. It's still in its plastic, right? Um, so that's kind of cool. So it's a three film Blu-ray set. So I picked that up off of him. If you haven't watched, if you like werewolf films, and this is a Canadian werewolf film, probably the best werewolf film is what, American Werewolf in London, The Howling, which, to mention, here's the second one that he ended up selling me, and that's The Howling in a beautiful steelbook, still with a J card, and new. It hasn't been opened yet. All right, and this is one of the better. If a person doesn't mention the an American Werewolf in London as a really great, one of the best werewolf film of all time, they'll mention The Howling. Sometimes they'll mention Dog Soldier. But anyways, there's a few werewolf films out there, but probably American Werewolf in London is probably the best. And then they had one of my all-time favorite '80s. What would you call it? A sci-fi film, a horror film? It's a mix of the two, and it really impressed me when I saw it when I was like, young in the '80s, and this movie came out. I went, vampires in space. That was extremely cool. I really like that idea, right? And you have the Alien franchise where you have the horror, and sci-fi mixed together. Well, this does the same thing, except this is about a group of like aliens who end up coming to Earth in a spaceship, and these astronauts or whatever wake them up, and then they come down onto Earth, and they're basically space vampires, but instead of sucking out your blood, they actually suck your soul out of your body, and the the I don't know if you'd call it CGI, the special effects at the time when you were watching this was pretty freaky. You go, wow, you know, um, that's pretty wild. Because when they suck the soul out of you, you kind of shrink into like you're aging like super fast or whatever, right? So how they did that effect was kind of cool. But now, I've watched this recently, and watch it now, it's pretty it's pretty cheesy by today's standards, right? But when it came out, it was quite fun to watch, and I still enjoyed it. So he had a really, really nice steelbook of it, all right, and he put it in a plastic case, so that's kind of cool. I don't have to use a plastic case to put it in, and but it doesn't have its J card, so but it's a really nice steelbook if you haven't seen the steelbook. Oh, the film's called Life Force, obviously. So there you have one of the vampires sucking the soul out of the girl there, right? So that was cool to find that. So I have Life Force on DVD, but I don't have it on Blu-ray, and so now I have it on a nice Blu-ray steelbook, right? Which is what's happening mostly now for me is basically upgrading movies that I already have because I've run out of movies to collect because I've got mostly everything that I want, right? So um, anyway, so those are the three films that I got, and they came with posters actually. The two steelbooks came with posters. Here, let me show you one of them. So this is the poster for The Howling. It comes with the steelbook. All right, you see that well? And I think, and here is the other one. Let me see if it is. Yeah. Okay. So in this one, is for life force, but it's basically the same as the front of the Blu-ray, right? So and it came in these tubes. The problem with it is the paper that it's printed on is stock paper, thick paper, so it wrinkles easy when you unwrap it because it's in a circular, right? So um, it's a tube, and when you untube it, you wrinkle the paper. So all right, so those are put this one back in as well. So those are the two posters that came with the two steelbooks. I'm not sure who Rebellion, Rebellion, and who put out this one? Scream Factory. Scream Factory put out The Howling. And this is probably can't tell. It's hard to see through the steel, through the Scream Factory put out this one. So they're both Scream Factory with the posters, and you can't really tell because of the plastic on the back. Who put the Ginger Snaps trilogy out? All right, so Scream Factory but a lot of Scream Factory stuff, and especially the horror genre. Some people are just really serious horror fans, and they'll pick up you know crap horror films, and Scream Factory puts out some pretty brutal stuff sometimes. But so does Kino Lorber and everything. They're just putting out stuff to put it out, cult stuff. But some of the movies are just like really bad. Um, all right, so that's the three. I also found this from uh, from a private sale, and that's um, the complete Big Bang Theory. One of season 1 to 6, and the other one of 7 to 12 um, on DVD. Now, some people are more picky than me, I think, and they prefer to get all their TV shows on Blu-ray. But it's really hard to find the Blu-rays, and when you do find them, they're quite expensive in the secondary market. But the DVDs aren't, right? And I think TV, unlike film, there's less of a, I mean, in my opinion, anyway, there's less of a need for like that super super clear image, right? So, um, but The Big Bang Theory is like one of the greatest TV shows of all time, and I think maybe for me it's only second to Cheers when it comes to the greatest comedy, sitcom of all time. Cheers has got to be the best, and this is probably the second best in my opinion. All right, so that's The Big Bang Theory. If you haven't watched it, it's basically about four really smart scientist geek guys, and their relationship with each other and the relationship with girls, right? So it's quite funny. What else do we have here? All right, so let's do this. I also This gentleman had a whole bunch of Criterions that he was selling, and I found four of them that I didn't have yet, or actually I either didn't have or, for example, this one, Hoop Dreams, all right, which is basically a documentary about a guy, um, like moving up and getting drafted by the NBA, if I remember correctly. Two ordinary inner-city Chicago kids dare to reach for the impossible professional basketball glory in this epic chronicle of hope and faith. All right, so this is very good, and I have this, but I have it on a DVD, so I upgraded it to a Blu-ray. All right, so Hoop Dreams and The Fugitive Kind. Again, this I have on DVD, but I don't have it on a Blu-ray. So I don't know much about this one. So four Oscar-winning actors: Marlon Brando, Anna Magnani, Joanne Woodward, and Maureen Stapleton shine in this enthralling film, which also brings together the legendary talents of director Sidney Lumet, writer Tennessee Williams. A smoldering, snakeskin jacketed Brando, and so it's probably boring. But anyways, The Fugitive Kind. Now, I did not have this one because this one is a more recent um, uh, production, right? It's like they put it out recently, right? It's number 1027 in the library, right? So this is a really fun film with Steve McQueen. Well, fun. The Great Escape is basically these guys are, prisoners of war during World War II to the Nazis, and it's all about them escaping the prison camp. So it was quite fun to watch. The motorcycle scene uh, was pretty cool, watching Steve McQueen on a motorcycle. Um, so that one I picked up, and then The Manchurian Candidate, the original. Um, this basically I watched, because everybody speaks about this film in very high regard, but when I watched it, I went, okay, it's okay or whatever, but it's not like it doesn't have. I don't know what it is about this film that people think is like super amazing, but it was entertaining enough. It's basically about brainwashing somebody, right? So and politics and brainwashing, right? It's been a while since I saw it. Frank Sinatra stars in it, so But most of Frank Sinatra's films are like okay, but they're not great. And I think who directed this? John Frankenheimer. John Frankenheimer. All right, so those are the four. Uh, so I didn't have this one, and I didn't have this one, but I had these two on DVD. Now I have them on Blu-ray, right? So it's cool because I picked these up um, for $20 each, and I can sell the DVDs for like $15 each. So whenever you buy something on a Blu-ray and you sell the DVD, when it comes to Criterion's, you're only losing like maybe $5 to upgrade. Whereas in a regular, if you get a Blu-ray, you might spend 5, 8, $10 on it, and to upgrade from a DVD, and that DVD you might be able to sell it for maybe three, right? So depending. But anyway, so those are all the films. All right, and last but not least, let's do the album. So one gentleman had a whole bunch of Kraftwerk uh, LPs, like updated Kraftwerk, but I already had a couple of them already, so I only picked up two from him, and that's Trans Europe Express. And this is a cool cover, but I like the original one with the band members. I like that one because that was the first um, Kraftwerk album that I ever listened to was Trans Europe Express, and I think it's basically their best. But a lot of people say it's you know um, Man Machine or uh, what was Autobahn, right? So but anyway, so uh, he was selling this one, so I picked it up, and I don't know if you don't know who Kraftwerk is, you got to get into some Kraftwerk. All right, Kraftwerk was like a '70s band, one of the first, German band, um, and one of the first, they made up their own electronic instruments somewhat. This was before the synthesizer, if I remember correctly, and they were playing like their own instruments that they created, and they're using electronic music, one of the first to use electronic music, so thoroughly in their music, right? So if you like electronic music, you're gonna love Kraftwerk, right? So I picked up this one, Trans Europe Express, and this one, Man Machine, and this one still has the original cover. I think the original cover looked like this, if I remember correctly. But this one is an updated cover. So, um, and here's the thing that I didn't realize and didn't know, and I'm going to do this from now on. Is this guy was quite smart, because what he did. These are actually hard plastic rather than soft plastic covers. But what he did was he took the album out of the sleeve, right? Okay, out of the jacket, because you know what happens with albums over time, when they're in the jacket, is you get that ring that kind of goes around it after a while, because the record is circular, but the jacket is square, and so you'll get an outline of damage around the dust jacket cover, right, over time. You'll notice thousands of LPs all look like that, older ones that if people have stored over time, what happens is they put them all together, right, on the shelf or whatever, and then they get squished together, and the squishing pushes the rim, basically, of the album cover, um, of the jacket, forward into each other, and then you get a ring that goes around the album cover. It looks stupid, right? So what he's done, and a lot of people I see doing now, is they take the album out of the jacket and put it in its own sleeve, behind the jacket itself. So when it pushes against, it's pushing against both sides of both sides of the jacket, not just one side, because it's inside, right? So it's supposedly, I don't know, but it supposedly stops that ring from showing up, right? So he did it with that one, and he did it with this one, right? So I'm going to do the same with my stuff, just to see if it works, right? All right, so those are the two Kraftwerk albums, one of the greatest electronic bands of all time, German band, and one of the pioneers of electronic music. All right. Then another guy had some blues stuff, and you had Moaning in the Moonlight by Howlin Wolf. All right. And Junior Wells, Coming at You. All right. Two nice blues albums. Now, Junior Wells is extremely good blues player. And I think Buddy Guy played on this. Didn't Buddy Guy play on this one? He was another great guitarist, a blues guitarist. So yeah, Junior Wells. Who else was in this? Yeah, Buddy Guy was on lead guitar, and Walter Williams was on rhythm guitar. Douglas Fagan on tenor sax. Levy, anyways, so on and so forth. So Buddy Guy was on this as well. So you have Junior Wells and Buddy Guy on one blues album. Extremely good. All right, so I got to protect that. And Howlin Wolf, Moaning in the Moonlight. Now, when I saw a picture of this album online, it didn't have that wrinkle to it, so I didn't notice it. But it looked like maybe it got bent in between when the picture was taken and when the guy gave it to me. Now I picked this up from him at like 9 o'clock at night, so it's kind of dark outside, and I didn't really see the album too well. So I would have asked for a discount for that, right? So, but it's still a great album. Howlin Wolf is one of the great blues players, and you can't go wrong with his stuff. And thirdly, he had this one, which is arguably the Rolling Stones' greatest album, Exile on Main Street, right? And it's a new issue. It has a very thin flap to it, and then it opens up like this, and it's a double LP if I remember correctly, right? And so there's it opens up, and there's the two. There's like an indentation sleeve that you can slide it into. So this one is thick. This one is a very thick LP album, right? So in Exile on Main Street, you can put that up, and is one of the greatest albums of all time, one of the greatest Rolling Stones albums of all time, right? So if you ever see it, pick it up. And then the most surprising thing that I found, um, of all my looking, because I've been looking for this album for, well, years basically, and it's not like I couldn't find it if I wanted to buy it new, all right? But this album new, like its original, the original LP, or its reissue, which is this is a reissue that I have of this. Um, been going for like hundreds of dollars. I don't know why. Maybe because it's so difficult to find, because I've been looking for years and I haven't been able to find it. I guess I could buy it new, but I would have to look into that. Um, but this album here, I looked on, on eBay, and it was, selling for like hundreds, like in the $100 range, or $200 range, or $300 range if it was new. So I'm guessing it's out of print, but I don't know. But I've been looking for this album, 13th Floor Elevators. They're like an Austin, Texas psychedelic band. During the '60s, like the early '60s, from like, I think this came out in '66 or '67, and it's one of the all-time great albums. All right, so um, it's got like a mix of psychedelic rock and blues and other stuff in on it, right? So, and it's very unique sounding, and it's up there with like Odyssey and Oracle, or other '60s albums, like Love's Forever Changes and things like that, right? So I've been looking for it for forever use, because I rarely buy anything new. Don't like to buy things new because you end up overpaying for them. So this wasn't cheap, but it was like, like 1/5 the price that it was going for, even used online. Um, so I found it and I picked it up, and it's basically a reissue of the album, where it gives you two LPs in it. One is the mono version of it, and the other one is the stereo version of it. So you get two records in one package, right? So that's extremely good, and I think that's everything. Uh, so I picked up some really great albums, and I picked up a nice TV show, some CDs, and some Criterion Collection, and some Steelbooks. All good stuff, right? for very, very, very inexpensive prices overall. Um, and you can't do any better than that. I'm not sure. I really want to thank people who buy things new because I don't have the budget to do it. But you guys, when you buy them and then you don't want them anymore, I'm glad to buy them off you, and I shake your hand for helping me out with my collection, and I don't have to spend so much money on getting it right. So um, if you're patient, you can usually get stuff used, right? So, but it means you have to wait. Like when this first came out and I bought it, I don't know how much it was when it first came out. If I would have bought it, um, I would have it, but now I have it for a much, much cheaper price. And as long as you're patient, you can usually find stuff used pretty good. And if you have a wide range of things that you like uh, to collect, to add to your library, then you know you can be patient because there's always something else that you see that comes up that you want to buy, and so something else might have come up, what I mean? Like, or that came up, or this came up that you were also looking for, right? So you don't really have to zone in on one thing that you want. You can keep it at the back of your head, and then over time, if you're always looking in the secondary market, you'll usually find what you want to find at a reasonable price. But you must pay your respects to the people that buy this stuff new, because when they buy it new, it has to be bought new before it gets into the secondary market. So thank you should thank everybody that buys stuff new. If you can't afford it and other people can, you should thank them, because that's how you end up getting their stuff over time. Right? Basically, could be because of the death, could be because of a change of maybe they were collecting records at one time and then they got bored with doing that, so they decided to move over to movies, and then they started selling their record collection in order to support their movie collection. And you'll always get it less than what it was new, right? So usually, I mean, occasionally you'll get like things that go up in price, but mostly things go down in price from the new price. So because if it doesn't, you can just go buy it new, right? Why would you spend $100 on something um, that you can just look for new and then buy it for $30 new? So uh, so yeah, so you got to thank them. Anyway, so okay, so that's everything. If you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up. If you like this type of content, I do all things media oriented: LPs, CDs, movies, TV shows, sports cards, comics. Although that's not as often, any media related thing, I'll cover, right? So, uh, and if you enjoy that kind of thing, think about subscribing. I'd appreciate it. And you have a great day, and I'll talk to you in my next video. Bye for now.